Awesome. So welcome to managing hybrid infrastructure with PowerShell. Just a quick show of hands. Who has all of their servers in one data center? Or one cloud? Or one spot? That's pretty much what I assumed. So go through some kind of tips and tricks today. Some of the kind of cool stuff that Microsoft's been working on to get you guys being able to manage all of that in one spot. So just quick about myself. You know, pretty common path. I'm sure a lot of folks in here, went from a help desk to a sysadmin. I was the guy, if I ever had to do something more than 3 times, I wrote a script to do it, starting with VBS and over into PowerShell. And then I became a system center consultant and an orchestrator SME. And at the time, I realized that pretty much everything I was doing in Orchestrator was just writing the PowerShell. Like, you gave up on the activities after a while and you just wrote PowerShell. All right, so I now work as a managed automation architect for Quisitive. Used to be Catapult Systems. We merged last year. But basically building enterprise-ready automations for customers. And managing them, right? Because a big part of this, and a big part of what I try to evangelize, and a big part of the book that I just wrote as well, is building automations that last, right? So, my managed automation came from, I was building automations for customers. 6 months later, they'd call me up, it broke. Like, well, what'd you change? It was always the first question, but being able to create things that you can, reuse and maintain is a big part of automation, right? You can write a script. It's great, but can we run that script again 2 or 3 months later and expect the same output? I am also a U5 through U8 certified soccer coach, so that's my newest ambition. But just a quick history. So you all know this. Right, PowerShell remoting went from 5.1 with WS-Man to OpenSSH. There's hypervisor based. The big thing about all 3 of those is you have to be on that LAN, right? And even a lot of customers or companies I work with, even their WAN is not completely connected. You get different continents, different things. It's not always great. With the advent of Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, those things, right? It really kind of opened things up to, now you can kind of connect to it from anywhere, right? So with an Azure VM, you can run a command on it just through HTTPS, right? So what Microsoft has done is created Azure Arc. How many people are familiar with Azure Arc? Okay, so Azure Arc is it's an agent-based service. And you install the agent on any server, anywhere, other than an Azure server, because it actually won't let you. But and what it does is it creates an object of that server inside of Azure. So that could be on your on-premise data center. That can be in AWS, VMware. They even have it now for vSphere and SCVMM. To be able to put it down at the control plane level and surface all those servers up through there. So what does that provide? Well, number one, you get a single pane of glass. Where every single one of your servers, you can look them all up at one time. Right? Also, you can enable a lot of the Azure services that are inherent that you would get on Azure VM on those on-premise or other cloud VMs, such as updates and logging and things like that. So you can see holistically across all of your processes and things like that what you have. Applying policy, security, change tracking, all sorts of different services. The best part about it, the cost of putting a server in Arc is nothing. Right, some of the services that you turn on, there's cost to them. Policies, change tracking, security, those ones do. Updates is free. Logging is just based upon the ingestion. So if you're already using log analytics agents to ingest data, it's no different. But just to get a server serviced up there and going, there's no cost to it, right? And what that does, the great thing about that is it makes that actual object inside of Azure, right? So that you can use tagging, you can use resource groups, you can, combine things together all you want. So hop into the demo here. All right, so can you guys see that all right in the back? Go a little bigger. All right, so traditional Azure VM I have running here. Right, I just want to get some information about the operating system. Right, so we can use this set azvm run command. So there's also one that you'll see is called invoke az run command. The difference between the set and the invoke is real time. Set is it's actually going to create that object and save it on that server. And another thing that I'm going to do here is set as job to true. Right? So what that's going to allow me to do is that one really large. You go away. Okay. So what that allows me to do is actually create a PowerShell job in the background. Right? So now I can run this on multiple servers and not have to wait for that script to finish on each and every server. All right? But the downside to jobs is they're unique to this session I have right here. Right? If I close this session, those jobs are gone. I have no idea what the status of them is anymore. But what I can do is, since we did the set az run command, is I can go back and I can get the az run command. Right? And this is just a little while loop that runs through to check for this completion status. Hopefully we got success and not failed. Right? And then we get our data back. Right? So we see here all the information that it ran. Now we can emulate this on an Arc server. Unfortunately, not as cleanly at this time, but it is getting better. Right? But there is a custom script extension that you can run on an Arc server to be able to essentially run a command on a server. Right? The command that you run, if it's a Windows server, is going to be a command prompt based, or it's going to be shell if it's a Linux server. Either way, it doesn't matter. I'm running PowerShell. I got that installed on either service. I'm going to run the same exact command on here. All right, it's pretty straightforward. We run through, and all of a sudden we're getting some errors back, right? That's because when we ran, right, we just did an HTTP request. We got a 202, said, okay, we submitted that. Good. Now it's all automatically, it's going down. We're doing the same exact thing, doing our little while loop, waiting for our success and our failed. Well, I sent that HTTP request, and then half a second later, milliseconds later, I'm trying to tell it, where are you going with that? So obviously it didn't like that too much. But now you see here, it actually is creating that instance on that virtual, or it could be a physical box or a virtual machine or whatever, wherever you have it running. Actually have it running on this Surface tablet as well. So we succeeded, and then again, same thing, we're getting our output here. Now, a couple things to note with this output here, that's just a big old nasty string. Right? And at the same time, if you do have any errors, they end up back in this same exact string. So you got to do a little bit of parsing and breaking things apart to be able to get that data out of there. And it's the same exact thing on the Windows, or on the Azure VM. Right? That's just a string. I just outputted a string, and that's what I got. Who can actually tell me what that's saying? But again, we can work around that. All right, so what we need to do is, so basically what we need to overcome to get, the one script to rule them all, right? Windows VM And that is a typo. I didn't mean to put that. But the Windows VM, it runs Windows PowerShell, right? Simple enough. We can get around that by just invoking pwsh, right? Arc is command prompt. Again, same thing. pwsh. Linux VMs, Arc, they both run shell. pwsh. That's all you got to do is put pwsh at the beginning of your commands, and you're running PowerShell 7 across any server that you want. The output is a simple string. Also, the output is limited to 4,096 characters. So obviously, the solution for this, make it a data format, JSON, XML, what have you, right? But you're still limited to 4,096 characters in both Azure VMs and Arc servers. Arc only retains the last output. So every time you rerun that custom script extension, it's overriding the previous one that ran. And then obviously Arc combines the outputs and the errors. So let's take a look at how we can get around some of those issues. And with the set az run command, it's real simple. You can do output blob URI and an error blob URI. That's going to grab your input or your output and your error streams, and it's going to write them directly to a blob. All right. So what do you need to get this started? A blob storage. In Azure Storage, you can create a SAS token, which will allow it to write directly into that blob without having to pass keys and things like that to it. All right, these are, they expire. The recommended is about a day. Then you rewrite and all sorts of other different permissions, things like that. It's all here in this one command, really. No, it has to be a SAS. Well, I'll take that back. You can now. You can use managed identities to get that and write back. But we'll dig into that a little bit with the on the Arc side. All right, so I'll go ahead and run that part. And so what I do here is typically what I'll do is I'll create a run command name. So I'm just building out my URI. Right, this is coming from my storage context. Right, so I know what my storage account, HTTP, blob storage, what have you. And we'll just break apart the VM ID, do subscription, resource group, VM name, output text, right? We'll do this same exact thing with the error text, right? So that's my URL out to where I'm going to write my data to. All right, so I just run that. Again, I can run my set command, and I'm waiting for my output, and I'm getting my data. F8 instead of F7 helps. So again here, so we're saying set that command and go get it, right? And again, last time we saw that as we were running, we started getting the error messages, right? So this time I'm just going to build a quick little try-catch in there just to ensure that we're getting the appropriate error message, right? Because you never want to do the just error action silent, because you don't know if it's not coming back for a different reason, right? You might not be connected, things like that, all that type of information. And then again, so now we don't need to go back and get that command instance view string, right? What we did is we wrote directly to the blob, and then we can pull that data directly back from the blob using an invoke REST method. All right, so now our data that came back is a nice clean PowerShell object that we can actually do something with. All right, so again, how do we accomplish this? Just get CM instance, and all I did is add a convert to JSON at the end. Took my script, that's the output I wanted, convert to JSON, invoke REST method, automatically converts it back for me if it's a properly formatted JSON, and I have a PowerShell object. All right, so unfortunately, The arc, as you notice, doesn't even have a commandlet yet. There is a set arc extension commandlet. It's still in 0.4.1. Your results may vary. That's why I use the REST API, as you guys saw. It's simple, it's quick, it's easy, and it works. On the same token, it doesn't have the ability to just write those streams back to a blob. But what we can do is we can wrap our commands, our script that we want to run, and capture our output, capture our errors, and then write those back to a blob, right? The downside to that being is, the traditional way to write to a blob is to, get a token, have the Azure CLI or Azure PowerShell on that machine, save that to a file, upload it, right? So I wrote a function here, just write script to blob, that all it will do is write a script up to it. So it'll take any string and just write it straight into a blob. It's just using the regular REST methods that are available with an SAS token. All right, now if we come out here, we see that we wrote our data straight into a blob. All right, so I can do this with both the script that I'm going to write and the return data that I'm going to get from it. All right, so, and actually if we look here too, you can see the data that came back from us running that against the Azure VM. There's our error and our output. So, get arc script wrapper is another function that I've included in here. And what this will do is you'll get a blob URI and a error blob URI, and it's going to write this all into a wrapped script for us. And there we go. I really should have There we go. So it just wrote this for us. This script is going to be the same every single time, with the exception of these 3 URIs. Right, these 3 URIs are telling it, here's your script content to go get, here's your error and blob outputs to get. It just automatically injects that right to script to blob function in there. And then our command, we just use a simple invoke command. It'll run it. You can even pass parameters to that and everything. And then, with a try catch, we can catch any errors, any terminating errors. And then we write our data back to the blob. So it's all being done directly from the machine to be able to support essentially what's available there. So we take a look here. Again, we're going to go ahead and run this against our Arc server. All right, but again, we're going to do a little different. So same thing, breaking apart that URI into a nice string. We're building our script wrapper, writing that up in there, and then this time, when we're doing the command pwsh, we're going to use an encoded command, right? Because our command's starting to get a little bit longer, right? This command stays the same length every time, thankfully, with the exception of however long your strings happen to be. But there is an upper limit that you can hit to passing a script into this. I haven't narrowed down the exact number on what it is yet, but there is an upper limit. but this doesn't hit it. But by using the encoded command, you're encoding that PowerShell script into a base 64 string. So you don't have to worry about escape characters or here strings or mismatched brackets, any of those type of stuff, right?
How do you keep your security team from going nuts when you do that?
So PowerShell and Defender, I know Defender does this. It decodes it before it runs it, and Defender will flag any malicious code that is encoded. It knows. I've tested it. It tries it. It works. Yeah, I mean.
But it shows up in the PowerShell log just as
It's base 64, so it's not encrypted, right? It's encoded. You can decode it right straight back down, which is what the machine does. And actually, if they look at it, it'll pretty much be the same characters every time. They'll see the logs coming through and getting that data back. One of the other things to keep in mind here is, as I mentioned, it overrides every single time that it writes a new one, right? So if I send that message to it and I say, hey, here's my new script to run, give me the status of that script. It hasn't processed that yet. So build a second function. There's two loops in this one, right? One loop to make sure that it's gone back from updating, creating, or waiting status from success or failed if it had run previously, all right? And then coming back and getting our status. And again, we're getting our return data directly from our URL. So there's our data. We got our 202 that says we put it. We waited for the update, waited for the start. We are good to go. All right, so we can try this again. So, create a slightly larger script. We're going to get that same exact data from a Linux machine, or we're going to get it from a Windows machine. Like we said, it doesn't matter. We're running that same command across all different servers. And the great thing about this is I don't even need to remember which servers I ran this command across to get the data back from it, right? Just using Azure Blob Storage, right? I can come in here, I can see, demo 2, here's all the machines, all the output data that came from it. And I can group that down and get to the individual machines that I ran. All right, and then through a nice little loop here, I can get my data, convert it from JSON. Again, you don't even have to download directly from, you don't have to download this to your local machine. You can stream it straight in. But for each server that I have in here, go ahead and parse through and give me my data. And there we go. We see what the two machines I ran this against. I wrote this one, it was slightly smaller. All right, so there's our data. I didn't need that, like I said, I didn't need to remember which machines it was, what that command was, whether or not I'd overwritten that previously on that Arc server, what have you. That data stayed there inside of that shell command. And another good point towards that, when we talk about security, the way that this function actually works is if we look at when it runs for an Arc server, I'm writing that script specifically into there. So you can come back and see the exact script that was written every single time. Okay, so let's put it all together in one fancy command. right? We have an invoke arc command function that we wrote, right? Pass the resource group name, run command, all these type of things, all right? Here's build out your URI, blah, 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 blah. Don't worry about that. Got you covered. If I can remember my hotkeys. All right, put it all together into one. So wrote a function in here, and we can take a look at it. Invoke AZ remote command. It'll automatically go through. It'll say, this is an Azure VM. I'm going to run this command. This is a Arc server. I'm going to run it this way. Come back, gather the data. Right, we get all of our executions. It runs through, finds everything as it goes. All I need to do is just pass it a list of servers. So there it's going. I basically told it, I gave it 2 resource groups in my Azure instance. One of it contained Azure VMs, the other contained Arc VMs. And it's running through. It's going to execute that command on each one of them, come back, get the data and everything like that it's doing. It's automatically building that big old long command for you with the URI. So we can see, look at that. The machine actually running on this Wi-Fi came back first. So we'll give them some credit there. And then so our Linux boxes are coming back, things like that. Super simple to do. All I had to do to get this to work is have the Arc agent installed, run a PowerShell 7, and have an Azure storage account. Like I said, we've actually already run across every single machine in there. So see, we got all that data back from every single machine. This came about, right? The first iteration of this, and some of you may have seen that at, it was the Research Triangle user group talk I gave a while back during Log4j. Had a customer who had 14,000 servers that they needed to scan for Log4j. And if you guys remember, it's not just, hey, is Log4j installed? It's checking registries, it's checking DLLs. It was an intense script to be able to find that. We were able to use this method to go out, and it was actually quicker for them to just install Arc agents than it was for them to go run this script on every single server, right? And Microsoft's made that even easier for you nowadays too, which we can take a look here. But what I'll show you just real quick is how simple it is to run these different scripts. The invoke VM command. And these are all be available on GitHub as well. Right, if we're doing PWSH, right, if we're Linux, we can just run it right there. But if we're doing Windows, since it is native, Windows PowerShell, we just throw our dot in front of it, and then so it runs in the same exact instance that's in there. I even have some scripts in here to help you get that all set up and installed. So I'm sure you're all familiar with this command here. Same thing, there's just a shell command that you can run. You can run that directly through the command extension itself as well, right? And just pass it through without the PWSH before you run this the first time to get it all out there and installed and up and running in your environment. But this allows you to just get that data, get it out there, know what everything is doing, know where everything is reporting, know where everything is coming from. Right. So again, I said, we get this central pane of glass. I see all my servers. I know these running, what they're connected, what they're doing. I'm able to see my CPU usage across all of them. But most importantly, I can connect to every single one of them and run commands on them. So, any questions?
When you do the basic 64, have you tried doing that with sign scripts at all? Does it work?
I don't think I've specifically tried. I don't see why it wouldn't.
Yeah, test that.
Yeah, I'd be curious to test that out as well.
I mean, if you're passing a script, you don't even need to do encoding. Encoding is there because, as Matthew says, to when you have limitations of 496 characters, or you don't want to deal with all the special characters in HTTP,
Mm-hmm.
then you are doing encoding. If you are passing with the PWSH, the file, you don't need to use encoding for a file. You just pass a file. This is for passing command.
So, yeah,
That's the difference. Like, so you don't need to additionally encode that file. The file will be passed with the reference to a PS1 file.
you can just pass that arc script as a dash command as well, if you know, because again the script's going to be the same every time. So you know you can build in your escape characters and all the other things I just didn't bother to do because I encoded it. It you know, worked pretty well.
All these things will become a little bit simpler once when they enable the new run command feature for our servers. This is what we're waiting for. So
Yep.
right now they're supporting it with Azure ARM, but once when they support it for Arc as well, it will kind of simplify the whole solution that Matthew presented.
So it's getting there. So they're adding a lot. Every day I come in here and I click and see new things like this Windows Admin Center. Right? There's ability to do control plane things directly from within Arc now as well. So before it used to just be able to surface things. Now you can actually do send control commands. Again, the onboarding process, right? Add a single server. It will literally just generate the script for you. You can tell it which resource group you want it to go to, whether you're doing Windows or Linux, if you're behind a proxy. And it will literally just give you a PowerShell script that you can download and you can run on your servers. Right? And also, you can also do, if you're doing multiple servers, it'll do the same thing. It'll generate a service principal that will be used to authenticate. Because if you do the single server, it's going to pop up on you and ask you to authenticate to Azure that first time. And then the machine itself is authenticated after that. You don't have to worry about it. Doing multiple servers, it'll generate a key that will get passed into it that will onboard them all, without the prompt. If you're using update management, and this works, I've used it. You click add servers. If those servers are already registered in Azure Update Management, it'll make them ARC servers in like 2 minutes. They'll all just show up right in there. It works really great because one of the great things. So if you guys aren't familiar with Azure Update Management, right, Azure Update Manager can patch your servers anywhere. Right? It runs that. You run it on-prem. You can run it off there. The problem is it was based upon log analytics, which is a timed database. So your agent stopped reporting. You had no idea that machine ever even existed. And these are static objects inside of Azure. If this machine gets turned off, this flips to disconnected. I know this machine no longer exists, right? So it helps keep track and inventory of things as well. So whether the machine got turned off or the agent stopped working, I'm gonna know, right? It's not just gonna fall off my list. So we had about, sorry, sometimes I talk kind of quick, so feel free to. Yeah. Hmm? Yes. So you talking about for the base64 or for the SAS token? For the token that you get at the end here, there is the ability in the API to use so you can create managed identities. Who all in here is familiar with managed identities in Azure? About half. All right. So for those, just real quick, for those who aren't, what managed identity is it creates an Azure AD object for that system inside of Azure AD, right? Essentially. So what that allows that machine to do is authenticate, or that resource. It works for VMs. You can use in automation accounts, function apps, a lot of stuff in there, right? So this way you're not having a service principal with certificates and secrets, things that get leaked. It is only that Azure resource that can do that authentication. So you can use a managed identity to pass through to that, and that will invoke that session as that managed identity, so that you can then pull that data down or push it up or what have you, through that. In order to use that, though, you do have to have the Azure, either Azure CLI or Azure commandlets installed on that machine. An Azure VM has that by default. I'm sure that you guys don't have that, the AZ modules installed on every single one of your on-premise machines. So it's kind of a give or take. It's like you can do it either way. Just which preferences do we want to have, and how do we want to keep that all up to date? And again, if you don't care about your output from your script, you just want to execute that script. Say you want to just install the AZ modules, you can just run that get command and just install module -az -force and assume it worked. You get your it will give anything that's a non-zero, it will come back and tell you on. But yeah, you can push it through that way as well. So it's all laid out in the API. Like I mentioned, there is a commandlets that they're working on for it. They're not the most robust yet. The one that I'm using down here, the Get AZ Connected Machine extension, it works great. Documentation is kind of light when it comes down here to the settings. All right, so there's commands to execute. That's where you can pass the managed identity. That's where you get those things. Maybe that's something we could bring up at the Docathon on Thursday. Is hey, give me some more documentation on this set and get. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this commandlet, this thing is my favorite thing in the world. Invoke AZ REST method. All right, you don't have to worry about headers or any of that. It's taking your local Azure context and using that to authenticate when you're running that REST command against Azure, so that you, like I said, you don't have to worry. You connect to Azure using the Connect AZ account, and everything that you send through that is going to use whatever it is you use to connect through with. But again, so this is all. I put this into a AZ remote command function out here. Just a couple. I mean, these are basically just some wrapper functions to get through here and get my status. So I don't have to remember all of this. Right? I just give it my command, my resource group, and my name. It's going to come back and give me my status. The script wrapper, again, this was pretty straightforward. Right? This is just a big here string. Inputting our different functions and URIs into it, and it's going to execute and it's going to run. It's going to get that data right back for us. You got the remote command output. It doesn't even care about the machines that it's running against. Right? This is going to go up and it's going to search your blob storage. So it'll come back. It'll get all the machines that you ran against that, give you your error and your output text and everything. Get it right back straight from there. So. And as things progress, as things get better, right? We can go in here. Because the original versions of these involved writing a ARM template to inject that into that. Now we have an API. What comes out of the API? It's going to end up in Azure CLI. It's going to end up in Azure PowerShell. All right, so it's coming through this path as well. Anything else? Good? All right, well, appreciate you guys giving me some time. I do have my book that just came out, so Practical Automation for PowerShell for our folks who asked a bunch of questions, come up afterwards, I'll get you a copy. If you want to order one, get code here for 35% off in all formats, so ebook, hard copy, what have you. And then all of this code will be up on on my GitHub. And if you're ever looking for me, pretty much Dowst anywhere. That's one of the benefits of my last name. There's only one other Matt Dowst in the United States that I'm aware of, and he's a professional surfer, so I get all the tech stuff first. Also, if you guys aren't aware, I do have a PowerShell Weekly, just a weekly newsletter I put out. It's just on my blog. It's nothing to subscribe to, no emails to give. It's not sponsored. It's just stuff that I found from that week that I think the community would enjoy. If you guys have anything that you think should be on there, please let me know. Twitter. Yeah, thank you. So Twitter is usually the best place to get a hold of me, but like I said, Mastodon, GitHub, all of those. It's all Dowst. But cool. Thank you guys. I think we're about 5 minutes back.